Welcome to the Shun podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Some quick business before we get started. As you know by now, I offer one-on-one coaching to help people recover from life in these high control groups. I work to help people grieve the past, find themselves, and then find the life that they actually want, not just the one they were given. I'm actually offering something special, so if you want to work with me, now would be a good time. I'm actually offering pay what you want pricing. That's not something you see very often, but I want to work with more people. I want to try to help more people. So, when you look at it, traditional therapy locally is usually, $100 plus per session. Online therapy is usually $80 or more. I typically charge $50 for coaching, which most people find reasonable, but I'm actually letting you decide the price. So the minimum is actually $20, but you decide from there. And by doing so, I'm hoping that I can help more people. So if you're feeling unhappy or stuck, send me an email at shunnedpodcast@gmail.com or reach out through any of the websites that I have, whether it's shunnedpodcast.com, ex-JWhelp.com or whatever, and let's start working together. We already lost so much time in these groups. You can certainly do some healing alone, of course, but when we work together on things, we can often heal a lot faster. And, we can also process things together, challenge perspectives, get new tools, find ways of different ways of looking at things, find acceptance, kind of go through this grieving process together. And in the end, more and more people have been reaching out for help, and seeing people that I work with actually start to find their voice, to make big changes in their lives, to be who they've wanted to be, or to just be proud of who they are. That's the best feeling in the world. Speaking of seeing people become who they are, or be able to speak to who they've been, today we actually have another brave person that's reached out to tell their story as part of the process of healing. It can be very cathartic to share your story with other people, to feel seen, heard, validated. So let's go on a journey with today's guest. As you listen, look for the lessons, look for the ways that maybe your story relates, and maybe you can learn about what has worked for this person, or maybe what hasn't. Maybe it's something that you can pull into your own life. If you were never involved in these groups, I get emails from people that just listen because they find these stories interesting or they find them inspiring. So please help spread the word. These aren't just cult stories. These are human stories. So many of the things that were experienced by the guests of this show are found in other areas of life. So share these episodes and let's help shine a light on the human experience. What's really going on in this world? You never know who it might help. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet today's guest.
My name is Christina. I'm 31 years old. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and I am currently shunned.
Okay, Christina. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
So I had been born into it. It started with my grandmother. She told me the story of a couple witnesses that knocked on her door, and the rest is pretty much history. My father, my aunt, and my uncle were raised in it from a very young age, and both my father and my aunt are still heavily involved into it. And growing up, my parents divorced at a young age, and I was more with my dad than I ever was with my mom. And so I became heavily involved into it. And that's where it all began. So from early age, I'd say, my parents divorced in 2002. I was about 12 years old. Mm-hmm. So it was about 12 years old is when I started getting heavily involved in the religion.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so when they divorced, was your mom one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
She came into it for my dad. She wasn't really wholly, really involved in it, but to make my dad happy, she got involved in it. But once they separated, she left and she's never returned. And like I said, I was just involved in it because I lived with my dad full time, and he pushed it so heavily on me and my two brothers, but my brothers more lived with my mom than they did with my dad, so they weren't heavily involved as I was.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so then you were raised in it with both of your parents, and then around 12, when the divorce happened, is when you kind of got more, I guess, serious
Yes.
about it.
Yeah,
Um,
because my dad, see, I didn't know my entire childhood. I never knew my dad was disfellowshipped. I didn't know what that was. And even when I got baptized, I had no idea about the disfellowshipping arrangement. I know it sounds like I was living under a rock, but that's how it is. I never knew of that arrangement, and I never knew my dad was disfellowshipped until I got much older.
oh wow. So wait a minute. Your dad was was he always disfellowshipped when you grew up?
Yeah, yes, he was, and I
Wow.
never, like I said, I didn't know that. I didn't know that this religion had such an arrangement, and I and my dad had got reinstated. It was about around the time that they got divorced, and I was going to the meetings and stuff with my dad. But yeah, I never knew that he was disfellowshipped or anything like that.
So were you all going to meetings and such? Were you all active before the age of 12?
Well, my mom would go, but my dad never really went. She made some friends at the hall, but like I said, they never studied with us. We never really went out in service as a family. We never got heavily involved. It was more just kind of on the fence about it. My
Mm-hmm.
mom and her taking us there. It wasn't until they divorced is when my dad really started to get involved in it, and then that's when I started really getting involved with it. But before that, it was just, it's a Sunday. I guess we're gonna go to meetings, so kind of thing. So
Okay. So
yeah,
before 12, then it sounds like you've kind of got to defend, a defining line here where things change. So
right.
before the age of 12, um, were you all, it sounds like even if you weren't super active, you were at least culturally Jehovah's Witnesses. So were you
Yes,
not
yeah.
celebrating holidays and all
No,
that stuff?
we didn't do holidays. We never, the things that going to school, I remember them setting up a Christmas tree, and I was just so fascinated by that Christmas tree, but I didn't participate in it. And then I always remember these kids telling me or asking me, well, how come you're not getting involved? Why aren't you helping, decorate this Christmas tree? And I was always embarrassed of my faith, always embarrassed to say, well, my parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. Instead, I remember saying, well, I knew that I had family in the Midwest that were Jehovah's Witnesses. So I remember telling some kids, well, I have family in the Midwest and they don't celebrate out there. I never said, oh, it's because I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I
Oh,
never said that.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was always embarrassed.
Yeah, yeah. So did you now that's interesting. Just the
Yeah.
way you were deflecting that as though there was some other family and it wasn't yours.
Yeah.
Um was
I'm sure. Yeah.
were you did you fit in otherwise at school? Were you a person who was did you have friends and such, or did you
Yeah.
still feel pretty much like an outcast
No,
there too?
I had a lot of girlfriends and growing up in school. I was, it wasn't until I hit the age where my dad started going back. I remember asking him because I started getting more involved if it was okay to still hang out with these friends I had at school. And I remember him saying, it's probably not the best idea for you to do that. And so I was actually taken out of school and put on homeschool, and so I never really talked to these friends of mine ever again because I gave those relationships up for this religion, for the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah,
So
like so many, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, the
Yeah.
isolation further intensifies. You're isolated because you feel so weird around these kids to some degree, and
Yeah.
then when you're homeschooled, you don't have any kids to be around. So it's just
Right.
really kind of you. Did you
Right.
have siblings growing up? You mentioned, I think, a couple brothers.
Yeah, I have two brothers. They were never really involved or had an interest in the religion. Um, because I mean they went as really young children when my mom would go, but once she got out of it, it was they went with her.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So I guess what was the way that the worldview that you had growing up? I mean, did that change any
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
years, especially as
My,
things you got deeper into it?
yeah, my worldview was Armageddon's gonna be here any minute. The kids that I grew up with, I started to view them as, unfortunately, I viewed them as wicked people that, you know, unless you're in this organization, you're not a good person, you're horrible, you're, what have you, and that don't, you know, the world around you was just such a terrible place and so wicked. And, Armageddon was just right around the corner. That was my view of the world.
Yeah.
So,
That corner's been coming for a long time. It's been a long,
yeah.
long corner we've been trying to turn. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
so, so growing up, you did go to the Kingdom Hall to some degree.
Yeah.
Did you have friends there? Did you like going to the meetings at all, or did you ever go out in service or anything?
Yeah, I did. I did develop some relationships, but they were never like the ones I had being out in the quote unquote world. They weren't, I didn't feel like I was as close to them as I had been with the girls that I had gone to school with. And, to me, it was just, I always felt more of an outsider within the Kingdom Hall than I did going to school.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so you're growing up in the religion, but not fully gung ho as far as that goes. And your dad
Yeah.
is this fellowship, and you don't even know what that is.
Right.
So you mentioned getting baptized. Was that before 12 or after 12?
No, I was 15
Oh,
when
okay.
I had gotten baptized. I was just barely 15. And like I said, I I felt like this is what I needed to do. Like this, I started getting involved in it pretty heavily, and I started going out in service a lot. And I felt, okay, they're talking about baptism. Maybe that's something I have to do. And so I went ahead and got baptized, not realizing that, if you ever wanted to leave, that there were serious repercussions to that. I never knew any of that. I had no idea that things that's disfellowshipping or being shunned was even a thing. I had no idea.
So, a lot of people get baptized pretty much out of obligation or just knowing that's the
Yeah.
next step. And I don't think even as a child, if somebody told you, what the consequences were, I
Yeah.
mean, I do believe a lot of us, myself included, did have some fear of that and knew it was a thing. Not obviously not everyone,
Right.
but I still don't think you can grasp that as a kid, which you are at
No.
15 years old. And
Right.
uh, so how did you get by? Like, so was your dad going? So at 12 years old, there's a split in the family, and
Yeah.
it sounds like, so you kind of went with your dad and your brothers
Mhm.
kind of went with your mom.
Right.
Um, how, so did your dad take you to the meetings? Was he shunned there and you just didn't notice, or did he have some way of deflecting that, or did you just leave right afterwards? So you just never really even, it never even dawned on you, or did he have some, it seems like you would have seen him being shunned
Mhm.
on some level. So did that ever occur?
No, honestly, it was something I never paid attention to. My dad started going back to meetings, and it was pretty quick process that he was able to get reinstated. He was actually, before he got reinstated, he was actually disfellowshipped for like 18, 20 years, something like that. But yeah, it was just something I didn't know about, and it was something that either he hit it really well, or I was just a very head in the sand kind of person. I never noticed it.
You were probably just running around with your friends or whatever and didn't pay
Oh,
attention.
right, yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
That's wow. And do you know, I mean, did he ever, so I guess he never talked to you about that at all. And
No.
um hmm,
Yeah.
was he really gung ho himself once he got back into it?
Yes, and to this day, from when he got reinstated to today, he's pretty very heavily involved in it to this day. And just this past couple weeks, he'll message my brothers and I randomly. And my brother has a 1-year-old daughter, and my dad was telling him that he's your daughter's gonna die at Armageddon if you don't straighten up and come back. And he was even telling me that because I'm pregnant with my son, and he was telling me that if my son dies because of Armageddon, it's gonna be my fault. And so I call it his being on his high horse stage, because there are moments where he is just on his high horse, it thinks he's the greatest Christian. And then other times it's just, my stepmom calls it his depression stage, where he doesn't want anything to do with it, or just doesn't want to be involved. So he's kind of a roller coaster, bit of a roller coaster.
That's a little insight too, though, into him, and being disfellowship for so long, and and then when he got that chance, really going back himself and bringing you into it, he probably thought he was saving you. And it's just really, again, why do people serve Jehovah as Jehovah's Witnesses? You see that for a lot of people, it's really just this fear that they're going to be killed by their God.
Exactly. I have this idea, like, to me, if they didn't teach about a paradise or an Armageddon, in all honesty, I don't feel like this would even be a religion anymore, and nobody would be in it if they didn't speak of a Armageddon and a paradise. And I've always felt that way.
Well, yeah, it's a great hook. It's a great sales pitch, and
it really is. It really is.
So you have the fear, and then you have the reward, but also, you also have the shunning, which for him, as one of as a disfellowship person, obviously that shunning took a toll on him, and forced him eventually to come back. When he went back, do you think it was you think part of it was to save you? I'm sure, but also like being disfellowshipped and going back and getting reinstated, did he gain some family members back other than obviously saving you as well?
Yeah, my grandmother and my aunts, they started coming back into the picture once he was reinstated. And they've always lived in the Midwest, but my family and I always lived out on the West Coast. So when my dad got reinstated, they actually came out, I think it was in 2003 or so, and they came out, and because he had been reinstated and he had gotten married in 2003 to his sister. And so that's so they started rekindling then, and then since then that's the whole reason why we moved out to the Midwest, was to be with them.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
So he remarried. How old were you when he remarried?
It was in 2003, so I was going on 13, 14, something like that.
Oh, okay. So, wow, that's a big change for you. What was it like? Because before 12, you had this one family.
Hmm.
After 12, not only is it more you and your dad, but your dad remarries, is going much more heavily into the cult.
Hmm.
Um, and then obviously you get baptized a couple years later. But so
Yeah.
what was that? What was that change like for you?
Well, I knew my dad's current wife. We grew up with her. She was actually a close friend with my mom's, and she's always been heavily involved in the organization. And I kind of feel, I could be wrong about this, but I kind of feel that's why my dad probably went back to the meetings after he got divorced, because my dad can't be alone and he can't be single. And so he knew my stepmom, and I feel like this is probably one of the reasons he got reinstated, was so he could be with her and marry her. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. I mean, that happens a lot. There are a lot
yeah.
of people who, uh, in in the organization, who lose a spouse for whatever reason, divorce
Right.
and death, whatever. And then
Yeah.
it's almost like, it almost feels sometimes like they had somebody waiting in the wings, like,
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
like just ready to go get into a relationship with the next person and move on.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like he moved on pretty quickly.
Yeah, because it was kind of like boom, 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 divorce, going back to the meetings, reinstatement, and then get married. It was all within a couple years of each other. It was all just happened all together, and yeah, it was kind of like boom, boom, boom.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So then, um, in that part of your family,
Hmm.
um, with your dad and your stepmom, you get baptized. What was that like for you, getting baptized in the path leading up to it? Obviously, you were kind of doing it because you knew you were supposed to. But I
Right.
mean, was there a lot of support around that? Was that something that you were praised for, or was it just kind of like, well,
Yeah,
you were just doing what you had to do?
I was more like um doing it because I felt I had to. It wasn't you know, there was support there. There was, great jobs and all that. But as far as it being deep rooted in my heart, or as a quote unquote calling, what have you, no, it wasn't. It was just more or less, this is what I have to do. This is what needs to be done. So it wasn't anything that was such a passion in my heart. It really wasn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can identify with that.
Yeah.
So you get baptized. Does life? You're 15 years old. Does life change for you in any measurable way after that?
Yeah, we moved. That's about the time we moved out to the Midwest, out to Missouri, to where my family is currently residing. And that's when life really started to change, is when we made that huge move. And we got introduced to the congregation out here in Missouri. And it was, I don't know, I because I have a stepsister, I always felt that, she always had to be up front. She always had to be the one that, if I would make a friend with a sister, she would always have to make a better friend to that sister, or, something like that. So I never really felt good about this congregation or going to it, but I'm 15, 16, teenage years now, and this is what I have to do, because at the time I didn't have a job, and I couldn't just move out on my own. It was just, I felt, honestly, I just always felt horrible about going. I never felt like this was my calling, or I felt like this was where I needed to be. It was quite the opposite, actually.
So you never felt right about it then?
No, I really didn't. I never, there were times, and, even my sister-in-law now has felt the same way because she's not involved in it either, but we we would be, in a good mood, doing really well, okay, and then we would go to meetings and then go home bawling because, we weren't disfellowship, but we were treated like we were because, we weren't at the time heavily involved. We weren't, going out meetings regularly. We were shunned before we were shunned, kind of thing.
That just really goes to show how much shunning is in the DNA of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
That they're always looking for reasons to separate themselves from you. And if the fact of the matter is that you're not intensely proving that you are one of us, then you must be one of them, and you might be a threat to us. So maybe we shouldn't have a whole lot to do with you. It's just really, it's so unloving, and it's Jehovah's Witnesses really shoot themselves in the foot because they're not. If they expressed any real love, they might actually keep more people inside the organization, but they let people go out the back door as quick as they try to bring them in.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So then you knew that this wasn't for you, even though you were baptized. You're 16 years old. Like you said, you didn't have a job at the time. Where were you going to go? So how did things progress then as you got closer to the age of 18 or being an adult where you might actually have more options?
Right. So I got disfellowship. I've been disfellowship 3 times, and honestly, third time's a charm. But I got disfellowship when I was 19, and for immorality. I had a boyfriend. I had a quote unquote worldly boyfriend at the time, and so I left. But I was able to move out of my dad's house, but things didn't work out, and so I couldn't afford at the time to live by myself, so that forced me to have to move back in with my dad, which, I couldn't just live there and not go to meetings. So I had to go back to meetings in order to live with him. And so after some time, I got reinstated, but like I said, I've always never felt right about it. And so I ended up a few years later getting disfellowshipped just to come back. And then again, I get disfellowshipped again. But
okay, well, let's slow that down a little bit. So you got disfellowshipped at 19 for immorality.
Right.
That pushed you out of, I guess, your boyfriend's place back to your dad. He's making you obviously go back to the meetings and everything. There's a lot of pressure there in order to live there. So then, you said a few years later, so like what, 22 or something, you get into another relationship?
Yeah, I got into it's. I've been disfellowship, 3 times for the same thing, and it didn't work out again the second time. And so the second time going around, it was pretty much the same kind of thing. I had to live with my dad, and they treated me because they felt, well, you had relations with the man that we can't share, this is kind of embarrassing, but we couldn't share. They refused to share a bathroom with me. They would refuse to drink after me. They would refuse to use the same silverware as me, towels as me. They treated me like I had some uncurable, horrible disease. And, it just made me feel just like a worthless, terrible garbage of a person because, your own family is treating you like you're just a vile, diseased person.
So it really, there's a good word for that is disgusted.
Yeah.
They lose all respect and look at you with disgust, don't they?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect way of putting it. Yes.
It's really
Yeah,
sad. You're
it is.
It's dehumanizing. Like you're not even a person anymore, and
Yeah,
or no longer their family. I mean, you all were family,
right.
and for them to
Right.
do that is it's just so severe. For them to act in that way. So this is when you were having relationships with people. Were any of the guys that you had relationships with Jehovah's Witnesses, or were they all
No,
quote
no,
worldly? Okay,
no, they
okay.
were all, none of them were ever Jehovah's Witnesses. I've never dated a Jehovah's Witness. I, never intend to, but that they, I think that's part of why, I mean, I could never find a brother. I was never interested in any brothers. And so I always kind of pursued my male relationships outside of the organization.
Well, sure. You didn't want to be there anyway, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering if there were other people getting in trouble congregationally, along with you. So it sounds like then you were just bearing the brunt of all of this.
Yeah, I was on my own. I was doing it all by myself.
Mm.
Yeah, no one was ever, I never, like I said, I never dated any Jehovah's Witness. Had never, I had never really had a heart to be so heavily involved in it that I wanted to marry somebody that was. So I always pursued a relationship outside of it.
Gotcha.
So,
So now you're 22.
mhm.
You're disfellowshipped again. I guess this
Yeah,
is the second time your family is treating you with this disgust.
yeah,
Um, I'm sure that made you want to come back, right? It's like they shoot themselves in the foot. They don't treat
yeah,
you with love; they treat you with disgust, which doesn't
yeah,
exactly make you want to come back. Um,
yeah.
and so
I
then,
felt, yeah, I felt like this was the only option I had because I mean, it was either I had to deal with it at the time and just be treated that way or be homeless. Those were my options.
yeah, so you either endure their disgust or you're
Hmm.
homeless.
Yeah,
Wow,
those were my options. Yeah,
those are bad options.
yeah.
So how long did that go on for?
It went on for a little while. I got reinstated again, but this time around, I got a job. I've been with the same company now for 10 years and was able, I'm grateful to work for a company that you can move around and move up in.
Mhm.
And so I was able to get more independence with this job. And I was able, because there's a lot of people that work with this company, I found another man that wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. And because of him, it was again that I went and was disfellowshipped again. And so that was back, I'd say probably 2013, around that time that I got disfellowshipped again. And I've been disfellowshipped since then.
Okay, so that was the third and final time.
Third and final time. Third time's the charm. Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
now the third time, or regardless, being disfellowshipped, you were being disfellowshipped more for behavioral reasons,
Yes.
because you weren't acting like they wanted you to act.
Hmm.
So you're disfellowshipped this final time.
Yeah.
Um, what was different about this time than the previous times? What made this one stick?
Because I'm self-sufficient now. The man that I was involved in before, we're no longer together, but I, I was able to find my own way. I live out on my own. I have my own car. I'm not having to rely on my father to support me anymore. And so because of that, it was more, it's a breaking free from all of that.
Yeah, yeah. If I remember correctly, at one point, I believe this was in your email when you emailed me there. I believe that there was uh, your father and stepmom, along with the way they were treating you as far as not sharing a bathroom and things like that.
Yeah.
Weren't they also maybe pushing other things on you?
Like, yeah, they were pushing, they forced me to take medication, because I remember going to my stepmom would force me to go to the doctor, and she would speak to the doctor. I wouldn't. Just it was between her, and she was saying, "Well, my stepdaughter is acting, bipolar. She's done a lot of things, bad things. You need to put her on this medication." And so I didn't really have a voice in the matters, but that they kind of forced me to take this medication. That was another condition. If I lived with them, I had to be on this medication. And because of that, I had put on like so much weight because of that medication. And I feel personally that they were wanting to see me fail. It was because they were doing all these things that, just pretty much being set up to fail. They always wanted my stepsister to, to be the voice, to be the center. And then just, I was always that failure.
So what do you think was in it for them if you failed?
I think a lot of it had to do with jealousy. I think my stepmom didn't like me or my brothers having a relationship with my dad. I think a lot of it was just jealousy was involved. That's honestly how I feel about it, about that situation.
Well, I mean, yeah. So there's that, and then just being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is a setup for failure.
Yeah.
If you ever want to have a life outside of it, they don't really teach you a lot of skills. They teach you to distrust people and to be scared of people on the outside and not to get any education. And so they really string you along and try to keep you very small and in a tiny box so that when you go out into the greater wide open world, you will fail and then have to come back to them.
Right. That's exactly what happened so many times. And this last time I was determined not to allow that to happen. And I think it was, I have to say that like a faith shattering moment happened in 2018 because, back in 2018, I was sexually assaulted by a man, and he, my body's reaction to that assault was that I bled out really bad. And I remember trying to go to the hospital and didn't realize at the time how dire the situation was. But I had gotten in my car and gotten a few miles down the road, and I started coughing really bad. And I started severe pain just settled in, and I was like, I need to get back home. But I remember at that time crying because I've always been in between because like fear always kept me halfway into the organization. And so I remember that day trying to get back home, and I was praying out or crying out to Jehovah saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll never do this again. And I was saying that because I felt because, well, this guy wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, that this is why this happened. Or as my dad would always say, if you had just stayed within the organization, this wouldn't have happened. And so sometime after that event is when I realized that this isn't right. This type of faith is just wrong. You know, I shouldn't have been crying out to God for forgiveness for being attacked by somebody else.
Yes, yes.
That's not how your faith, or that's not how, because I still have a passion for God, but I felt like there was something missing here. There's something seriously flawed in this system, that there's seriously, that the mindset that I was raised with, the doomsday, if you leave, this is such and such is going to happen. I always felt after that incident, that's when I felt like, okay, there's something seriously flawed here.
Yeah, and it's also so stupid of them to say things like, this only happened because you left.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, let's not pretend that sexual assault doesn't happen within the organization.
exactly.
It
Yeah.
absolutely does.
Yes.
And if nothing else, so what are you saying? Are you saying that because I don't believe the same as you, God is letting me be sexually assaulted? Like,
Yeah.
that's really messed up.
That's what made my faith just completely shatter at that point, because it didn't make sense to me that this is how it is. And I in all honesty, my dad was very abusive to my brothers, and he was he was he was sexually abusive in a way to me, but he was more so towards my stepsister, because I can recall a time where he was reconstructing the house, he was rebuilding it, and he had a little hole in the wall facing the shower where my stepsister showered, and we caught him looking in on her. And he's a professed Christian, he's a Jehovah's Witness, and yet that behavior, he was able to get away with it. Nobody did anything about it. And to say that, oh, because I was dating a guy and he harmed me, that's the punishment I get because he's not labeled as a Jehovah's Witness. And it's just, it wasn't connecting with me. It wasn't making sense that, this a predator, as long as he's a Jehovah's Witness, that's okay. But if he's not a Jehovah's Witness, then, this is what happens.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize your dad was abusive like that too.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, very abusive. He would physically abuse my brothers, and he it was this is what we grew up with, and I felt that it was normal behavior. It wasn't until years later that my sister-in-law actually was the one that said, well, your dad was really abusive. And I'm like, you know what? Looking back on it, he really was. He was very physically, emotionally, psychologically abusive
Sexually,
everything to me and my brothers, and even my stepsister. And, it took so long for me to realize that, but yeah. Yeah,
well, often that's why somebody gets on their high horse, because they're trying to right their wrongs by getting on that high horse and trying to save you in some other way, as though it somehow makes up for their abusive behavior. And I'm so sorry that you, your stepsister, your brothers, and anyone else in his path had to endure that kind of abuse. It's just not and so much of it goes on in the organization and nothing is done.
Yeah, and I always felt uncomfortable when like young sisters would come around my dad, I always felt uncomfortable with that, but yet again, nothing was ever done about it. Nothing has ever been done about it. And but that situation with my dad is just, everybody look the other way kind of situation. So the elders have never done anything. Nothing has ever been done
So
about
they
it.
know about it? Have they been
They
told?
they've had some knowledge of his abuse, but and my dad has met and my stepmom has met with them on countless occasions, but like I said, nothing's been done, and he's still heavily involved in it. And he's not disfellowshipped. He's not being shunned. So it's nothing's been dealt with. Nothing's been taken care of. So
Do you know why
yeah.
he was disfellowshipped the first time?
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't have a clue.
That would be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
It's because if it was something like this, the fact that they would know that and then ignore it
Yeah.
now, knowing that he had a past of some
Yeah.
sort, that just adds another
Yeah.
very sad layer to all of this. Talk about disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's hitting me as we're talking. They're treating you with disgust while he's abusing people. And, I don't
Yeah.
know, and you don't have to say how far any sexual abuse went. But I mean, just the fact that he left a hole there so that he could watch people, that's predatory behavior. And
It is. Yeah. And I can recall several times, like, young sisters would come up to me, or like, sometimes if I was with my mom, we'd see a young sister. She would always come up and say, your dad or your ex-husband creeps me out. And we're like, yeah, I know. And, it's like these people know about it. These sisters know about it, but it's like, it's nothing is taken care of. Nothing's ever done about it. So
when random people are coming around saying your dad or your husband or whatever creeps me out,
yeah.
that's not a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I am sorry.
Yeah. But that's where I think that's where my faith is that's where I lost faith in the organization. It's because, my dad tells me, well, to my brother, your daughter's going to die, your 1-year-old daughter. And then to me, well, your unborn son's going to die. And it's like, yet, okay, well, you're a instead of protecting us, you were always a predator to us. And yet you are going to be there, but in that new system, but my niece and my unborn son aren't. It's like, so I remember saying a few weeks ago, so God wants predators and not, children or, innocent parties to be there. It's like, yeah, it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, he, a predator, is much more in favor with God than your unborn son.
Yeah.
That is just so warped. And, that, good grief. What good has come from your faith in any of this? Within the organization, let's say, maybe you found some other, maybe you still have a faith in God and you found another expression of that. That's good for you. And I hope that you find something that you're happy with, but, where are the positives in your interaction with Jehovah's Witnesses? Where are where's the benefits of any of that?
Absolutely none. I can't honestly when I was in the Jehovah's Witness organization, life sucked. And when I got out of it, I'm finally feeling these last couple of years, it's been a slow process, but finally feeling not just physically out, but mentally out. And being out of it, I've accomplished so much. I lost over 70 pounds, and my work has this program where, you make good choices and you win money. So I was able to win $5,000 over that.
Oh, cool.
You know, I'm working on my career. After my son's born, I'll be starting my going back to fall semester in college. I've started going to another church community, and they've been such wonderful people, providing me I have such a huge support system with help, because I'm going to be a single mom, and just having all these people come forward to help me and not one of them was a Jehovah's Witness.
Of course.
Looking at my life now and where I was before, there's no comparison. It's just, once you get out of that organization, it's just so amazing. It's so freeing. You can't put a price on that.
Yeah, you can finally start living.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you not only feel physically out, but like mentally you've woken up as well. So what's been a big part of that for you as far as mentally waking up?
Well, I've started when I look on the outside looking in, when you look at it, it doesn't make sense. Why would a loving God, do da 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 da? It just doesn't make sense. Why would his quote unquote organization treat people like this? And yet, I was raised that in the world, these people are so wicked, but these quote unquote wicked people are actually more supportive, more loving. They're just genuinely good people. And yet they, to the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're so wicked, but actually, the opposite is true. It's like these people, the people out in the quote unquote world treat you like a human being. They support you and help you, whereas it's complete opposite in the Jehovah's Witness culture, organization, or what have you. So
it's so that has helped. Have you also done anything to break down any of the beliefs that you once held? Things like Armageddon that were such pivotal points in our lives,
Yeah.
and where the fear was really used around those things, or just learning the history of the cults, or just learning what a cult is and how it works. Has any of that really helped you?
Well, I realized the fear is what kept me with one foot in the organization, and the fear of Armageddon was so ingrained in my heart and in my mind that, people can say, well, why don't you just walk away from that? Well, you can't if you were raised in it, and this is what you've been taught, all these years. And I can recall times just going to work, bawling my eyes out, thinking, why am I doing this when you're just going to die anyway? And so on that note, I actually started seeing a therapist for that and getting help professionally. And she's, it's been a long process trying to break free from the doctrine of Armageddon and imminent death. But as each passing day goes, it doesn't feel like there's still a tight anchor around my ankle. I feel more free than I did before.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. How many times is Armageddon mentioned in the Bible?
Mm-hmm.
One time.
Yeah.
This thing that is one of the fundamental tenets of Jehovah's Witnesses, that doomsday is coming.
Yeah.
The word Armageddon is mentioned one time in the book of Revelation that they see as a very symbolic book, but the 144,000 and Armageddon, those are literal things.
Yeah.
And everything was a build up to that apparently one word in Revelation to Armageddon. Right. And they've really cherry picked that. So it's not, there's not a lot of basis. It's not something that has a lot of a lot of support around it, and yet they use that as the basis of the fear to
Right.
keep a lot of people in and stuck, and it's just really sad.
Yeah, it is. And also I encourage people to read that. I think it's The Crisis of
Yep,
Conscience.
from Ray
And
Frank.
that's really like so informative if you've been like me, just had so much fear or one foot stuck in the door, as it were, to just sit down and read that and realize that, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This, it's not, these brothers in the governing body, they're not what they appear to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When you start seeing the man behind the curtain,
Right.
you can start to realize that a lot of your fear is very unfounded.
Right. Yeah.
In reality. So, um, you've been out now for what?
I would say
7 years, 8
fully.
years?
Yeah, I've been out physically about 8 years. Yeah.
And mentally for a couple?
I would say a couple of years mentally.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm just now, with my child coming, I didn't want to have, I knew for a fact that I'm not raising my child in this cult. I'm not raising them to have that fear that I had growing up. And, it's something even my older brother, even though he wasn't heavily involved in it, it's still something that he has struggled with. And so I decided I refuse to have my child raised with such fear. And, that's what I've been really focusing on, is finding, a loving, supporting community.
Yeah. If your 3-year-old is afraid of dying imminently and afraid of hailstones coming down from the heavens to kill him, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
That's not, let kids be kids. Why in the world do 5-year-olds, why are they afraid of sunsets because the sky is red and it looks like the scary pictures in the magazines and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, that's messed up.
I remember being a young child and it was like pouring down rain, but the sun was out. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this has to be Armageddon, because the sun was shining but it was pouring down rain. And that's, any sort of weird weather or anything growing up just terrified me. I don't want that for my child.
Parents are supposed to make children feel safe, not terrified.
Yeah, no, it was I feel bad for these Jehovah's Witness children, but it's not, you don't have that sense of safety. No. You don't. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, I never ever felt that sense of safety. It was always, am I doing such and such right? Am I, obeying everything that the Watchtower is telling us to do? Am I, doing everything that I need to do so I don't die at this battle of Armageddon?
Yeah. Well, I love that, when you have your son, that you have a different plan for him to raise him in an environment where he can feel safe and happy. Yeah. So you are today then shunned by, I guess, your dad, although I guess he can reach out and preach at you.
Yeah.
And your stepmom, and did you lose anyone else in that?
Pretty much the entire, except for my uncle, my dad's side of the family is pretty heavily involved in it. My stepsister has nothing to do with me. I haven't spoken to her in years. I don't even know if she knows that I'm expecting my first child. I don't know, but I haven't spoken to her or my grandmother or my aunt. My aunt actually blocked me on social media because I was telling my dad about how I felt about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they've blocked me. They've it's not just being shunned, you're being blocked as well.
Oh yeah, the shunning kind of bleeds into everything, doesn't it? Social
Yeah,
media as
it does.
well.
It does.
Um,
Yeah.
if you could say anything you wanted to your family who shun you, or former friends, or your sister and stepsister, or any of these people, what would you say?
I'm sorry that you are going to be living the rest of your life like this with such a close minded viewpoint. Instead of following God, you're following eight men on a governing body. And I'm sorry for that. And I'm sorry that, you are so just so wrapped up in that you can't see the actual, life for as beautiful as it is. Because
Yeah.
life is, once you leave, life isn't this doom and gloomy wicked place that these Jehovah's Witnesses, my family included, think that it is. It's really not.
Yeah, there's a lot of beauty to be had in this life that we have, and they really do miss out on it.
Yeah.
They've given up this life for one that they think is going to come in the future.
Yeah, and I have a life motto now that, because I remember when I was starting to get mentally out, I've always had a deep love for the holidays, Christmas, Halloween, and what have you. And I just within the past couple years, maybe a year or so, I started getting, Christmas decorations and Halloween decorations. And there was a couple of times where I cave into the fear that I was taught with and throw all those stuff away. But then I started to think, well, why don't I just see what happens when I don't? And I felt so liberated. It was so amazing. So my life motto now is just keep your Christmas tree. So whatever it is that you've wanted to do when you left the organization but couldn't while you were in it, just keep to that. And for me, that's keeping my Christmas tree.
Yeah, nothing bad will happen if you have a Christmas tree.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it does, and there's a deity out there that's so petty that cares that you have a tree in your house, then maybe he's not the deity for you anyway.
Yes,
That's
yes.
pretty petty. So,
Yes.
so what do you enjoy about your new life since not just leaving, but also waking up? What are you enjoying about it?
I'm enjoying meaningful relationships. It's not, these relationships that I've been developing are on condition. If I feel like I've slipped up or did something stupid, I'm not going to be shunned for it by these people. I'm not going to be reprimanded for it. These are genuine people, and you can be yourself around them. You don't have to really hide who you are. You can just be you. And that's such an amazing feeling to just finally be yourself. And because I've always felt like I've hidden behind, a curtain or a veil, as it were, because I couldn't question my faith growing up. I couldn't, obviously I couldn't have a Christmas tree, or couldn't, date somebody without having serious, consequences to that. But now, you can do all the things that you've wanted to do and not have to worry about, being shunned for it, because these people, they're genuine people and they're not going to shun you for what you do. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, what is it? Do you have anything that's aspirational? I mean, obviously, you're enrolled in school and
hmm
you're about to have a son.
hmm
Um, any plans for the future? Anything that you are, or just even any hopes or dreams for yourself or your son to be?
yeah. So I'm focusing on graduating college within the next year or so. I remember times past I've tried to go to college when I was a Jehovah's Witness, but I was always discouraged from it. And so I always flunked out of it or just didn't continue with it. But I'm actually further along in college now. And so my goal is to is to graduate and my son will be here in August, so, I want to have, so it'll be nearing the holiday season soon enough. So I want to have my son have the Christmas tree and to go, to the church that I've been going to here recently. So just completely breaking free from that side of my family that are still Jehovah's Witnesses and just being completely free of that.
Yeah, yeah. What are you going to college for?
I am going to college for business administration.
Nice.
So I'm excited about that. And I feel really good about it. I don't feel guilty about it. I don't have the why bother with it attitude when you're just going to die or you're just going to not need it in paradise kind of attitude that I had growing up. So I actually feel I feel really good about it. So
Yeah, why would you bother being a lawyer or a doctor or anything like that? We're not going to need that in paradise.
exactly. Yes, and that's why I never finished college in my 20s, because I had that, well, it's not needed. It's not going to be needed in a few years, or why even bother with it? It's not going to be here in paradise. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, good for you. I'm glad that you've found some things to live for,
Yeah.
and some things that you want in your own life and that you want for your son as well. I think that's
Mm,
awesome. And, wanting to share positive things with your kids instead of fear
yes,
sounds
yes,
like a beautiful way to raise a child.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, because it was, like I said before, it was always, I didn't have a peaceful, happy childhood. It was always a fear of death, as it always felt like death was knocking on your door and it was going to get you at any minute. So that's not how I want to live my life anymore, and that's not how I want my son to be raised. So
And now life knocks on your door and you can answer
yeah,
and enjoy life. And I love that for you and for him when the time
yeah.
comes. And I just hope that I wish the best for both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
As always, I want to thank everybody that's brave enough to get on here and tell their story, so that they can help those that listen. And I hope that in listening back to it, you get a different perspective and can give a little more weight to what you experienced and find some more healing. If you're listening, you can support today's guest by leaving a comment of support on the website at shunnedpodcast.com on the episodes page. While there, you can find the date for the next Shunned Recovery Project online meetup, reach out for one-on-one coaching to get moving on your new life, or buy some merch and rep the show. Visit my other site, ex-JWhelp.com, for helpful videos and a downloadable roadmap of life after leaving, as well as resources like meetups, books, and a lot more. Join the Facebook support group called Shunned Podcast. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and more as Shunned Podcast. Leave a review on iTunes or other podcast apps for both this and the original podcast, This JW Life, so that more people can find these stories and get the help that they need. Donating equals loving. So if you love these stories and find them helpful, please support the show at patreon.com/shunned. And there's some rewards there, and it really means a lot to me to see that people support what I'm doing, and it helps me to do more. The theme song for today is No Hell Yet by Fear of Armageddon. And as I end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God